All right. Weldon and Ann, thanks for joining me.
Yes,
Yes.
sir. We're
Solo.
looking forward to it.
I know
Yeah.
you're solo. I'm sorry.
Partner in crime is in here.
Fortuitous that we're here, in Tennessee, Nashville. We love Nashville.
Yeah.
And
We love Bitcoin Park.
we love driving in our RV to get here. That's always fun.
Your RV is a palace. You gave me a tour of it because we had met at a couple different conferences and I never seen the RV.
Right.
And finally in Georgia, you're like, come check it out. And I was like,
I think I said, come have a drink.
come have a drink, have a scotch, right?
Come have a scotch. And that was a good one that day. That was nice.
That was a great day.
Yeah, it was good. We can have more of those,
We're
mobile. It's got wheels.
going to have a lot more scotches in the future for
I
sure.
hope so. Goes well with beef.
It goes great with beef. But one of the things that I like to do starting off podcasts is I like to give the guests a little bit of context, just how I've gotten connected with guests. I think it adds a good experience for the listener, but you're both people that have had a massive impact on Harry and myself. And I know I can confidently speak for him to say that. And we first got connected in July at the Beef Initiative out in Colorado at Jason Rick's ranch.
Yes.
And I don't think you know this. I don't think I've actually told you this story before, but I was struggling because I was still working a full-time job at EY, trying to build the show out. And I knew that like, this is where my heart was, my passion was, but we still weren't really making that much money. It was more of like, I think this could become this, but we're not really doing it now. And I was struggling to figure out, should I quit my job? Should I go all in on this? And then we ended up getting to speak at that event. You spoke before us, and there was just something about your story that was just so motivating and impactful. And we'll tell the story for the listener, but just the way that you've both like built your business and your ranch by faith, that was super impactful to me. And it was actually one of the catalysts for why I went deeper in my own Christian faith and have had an amazing transformation the last few months. And that's really because of both you were the catalyst for that. So I just want to thank you so much for the impact that you've had.
Yeah.
Praise God.
That's so sweet. That honestly, Weldon has a master's degree in international finance. I have a bachelor's degree in telecommunications. We didn't grow up thinking we were going to do this. It is Weldon's background. Like you said, we'll tell our story in a minute. But to see when you just surrender and God just moves you and you're like, okay, fine, I'm going. And you just do your thing. It's been wonderful. I can't imagine not doing this. I never, ever dreamed I would be a grass-finished beef rancher in Texas. So
yeah.
But by being a grass-finished beef rancher in Texas, we have impacted thousands of people's lives health-wise over the last 22 years. And many of them tell us their story. And so it's just as motivational for me to stand on my front porch and let them tell me their story, as it was for you to hear our story the first time and for anyone.
Yeah.
And so that's very motivational. It gets you up in the morning.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it's amazing for both of you because it's like you've been hearing all these stories from your customers, how much your beef and your products have been impacting their lives, their health, they're curing autoimmune diseases. But it seems like the year and a half that this has been where you've become more public and you've been going to these different conferences and getting the opportunity to impact people.
It's true.
And I feel like you both have there's like this quality to both of you that kind of draws people in because it's just a very honest story. You were looking to improve your health and that really led you down this whole pathway. So it's amazing. And maybe that's where we dive in is just learning a little bit more about where you both were 20 or so years ago after 9/11.
Yeah, so we had to dive in.
I was going to say,
it was a question of living or dying.
Right. It wasn't, hey, let's improve our health. It was like, okay, you're on a slippery slope decline is the word they used, I think.
Yeah, so the story is with my health, I had a stroke shortly after 9/11, which was a very stressful time. I was a money manager. We had about $100 million under management. They were airline pilots that were our clients. They have a really complicated pension plan that required something other than a self-directed, account that the pilot would manage. And so, excuse me, and the stress of that event and watching those two buildings fall and me knowing what that was going to do, how it was going to impact our finances and our future life. So I was educated in that, but God just said that that's not really where I wanted you. And remember, I got you to read this article about a grass-fed operation south of Fort Worth. That's what I want you to do. So we had to go visit this this ranch. Burgundy Beef is their name, south of Fort Worth. Good people. They mentored us for a little bit. Didn't take too long because I was raised this way. It's really pretty simple model. Just so everyone out there can hear this, keeping animals on pasture and then processing your own animals for your own food supply is a really easy model. Going to a feedlot, finishing them on grain, all the transportation, the carbon footprint of all that is completely disastrous for, the environment and all that. And so that's the harder model. The easier model is just having your own animals and keeping enough supply of that so you're eating that product. And so anyway, I'm in the hospital. The story is I talked to my cardiologist and said, could food have anything to do with the fact that I just had a stroke? And I have 50% blockage in both carotids, roughly, and all 6 arteries of the heart. And he said, cold stone, straight in my face, food has nothing to do with your health. 23 years ago.
Right.
And it's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but I'm smarter than that.
You intuitively knew that diet and lifestyle had something to do with what happened.
My granddad provided that intuition. He lived to be 95 years old. It's a debate on 95 or 96. Let's say 95. And he was never prescribed a single prescription. He ate off his farm / ranch. He ate his own product, his own 1 acre garden. He had a roughly ½ acre orchard, ½ acre of vines like raspberries, blackberries, grapes. They did their own canning. They ate their own food. And not to be prescribed a single prescription. He spent 1 day in the hospital with a broken, cracked rib from a fender bender after church.
Right.
And
That's it.
he went to the hospital. They taped his ribs up. He was, the next morning the nurses came in and he was gone. And they called my dad and said, your father is not here. And he goes, well, I'm sure he just checked himself out at like 4 in the morning and went back to work. That's just what he does. He works. And so I knew what the lifestyle he had lived. My dad got educated at Tech in the ag department, animal science. He was in the livestock judging team. He was really into that. But that indoctrination from Texas Tech's animal science department led him to go home and start finishing everything on grain. Shortens the timeline. Time is money. This is just an easy layup, They didn't know the physical medical consequences of eating grain finished long term. They know that science today and they're ignoring it. And during my dad's early years in his 20s and 30s, 40s, we didn't know that science. And we didn't know about the omega-3s, omega-6, that relationship. And it's like, who wouldn't finish their animals faster, quicker if they could and make more money, except it's not healthy.
Yes.
And they didn't know that. But then my dad had 2 sextuplet bypasses in his lifetime. My mom had, we don't even know how many, 18 plus TIAs. Those are transischemic strokes, small little strokes where the brain reroutes the circuitry really quickly. You're kind of fumbling with your words for maybe 30 seconds and then all the lights come back on, that kind of stroke. She also had a major heart attack. Both her carotids had stents in them. And all of that occurred due to the fact that we were so carnivore, more carnivore than, we didn't call it that then. We just ate lots of animal proteins, chickens, eggs, raw milk, beef, pork. All of that was a part of our daily life. And then it almost killed us. Well, it did kill us prematurely. My dad lived more than 10 years less than my granddad did. And my granddad spent, what's a box of Excedrin and 1 night stay in the hospital for a lifetime of health care? That was his health care. That's it.
That was it. And you saw the difference in one generation from your grandfather to your father. That's incredible. And Ann, what did you say to the doctor? Because this is a great story.
It is. It wasn't as simple as Weldon had a stroke and he read this great article. It was a little bit more complicated. We absolutely were standard American diet. We had 4 little kids. Our children were in that kindergarten to 3rd grade age range. And so driving him to the hospital, I was like, man, I don't want to eat that bad food. So we grabbed something quick and we get to the hospital and his triglycerides, am I saying it right?
Triglycerides?
Were off the chart. And the doctor said, if I didn't know any better, this was the ER doctor, not his cardiologist. If I didn't know any better, I'd say you just ate a Big Mac. And I was like, oh, and in my innocence, I literally said, well, is a Whopper. It's bad.
Yeah.
I literally drove my husband through Burger King drive-thru on the way to the hospital while he's having a stroke. Face is sliding down, speech is slurry, and I'm not wanting to eat the hospital food, but I'll eat Burger King. It's like so bad. It
2
was,
for 1.
it
But
was
that's how little we're
literally-
taught about nutrition.
It 100%. I mean, it was dollar special day, so we got great deal. You know.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was
So
terrible.
I grew up on my grandmother's cooking for the early part of my life. They didn't live very far from us, and
Mhm.
I'd eat every meal I could, rode around in the pickup with my granddad.
Mhm.
You know, they just, they didn't know why they did what they did, or maybe they did. My granddad never had an air conditioner in one of his vehicles, pickups
Mm.
or cars. And he'd always say, "Oh, I need to sweat." Well, he didn't say I need to detox.
Yeah, or
'Cause they
sauna.
didn't- yeah, or
Right.
sauna.
What to do.
Now we have infrared saunas.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, we don't.
We pay money
heaven
for
forbid.
what he just said. This happens naturally in
Right.
West Texas. You know, in the summertime, I'm going to sweat all I can. He didn't intentionally sweat. He just sweat.
Right.
And so he was just extremely healthy and lived. He died of his own will.
Mm.
He had a small fender bender. That's the second little wreck in Lubbock. And they took his license, said, "You got to go get your hearing and eyesight checked." He failed those, had to get glasses and hearing aids. And that's when he pulled the trigger. He said, I'm not doing this.
Mm.
He didn't pull the trigger.
No,
He-
no, trigger's on a gun, so I didn't mean
Yeah.
that. I'm sorry. He pulled the trigger in the sense he goes, I
I'm
know
done.
my decline has started, and,
Mm.
and I don't want to go out that way of nursing homes, living in that institutional environment. He got all his family together. There were 5 kids still alive, and they all were around him. And he said, "I'm going to quit drinking water, and you're going to let me go."
Mm.
And he did.
Wow.
Yeah, he did. He was
So
really.
he died of his own will, died in his own bed. He was born in a bed in Mississippi, died in his own bed in close to Tahoka, Texas. And he's the one that made the decision that I'm not going to burn up my savings. You impact your kids what you inherit on the healthcare system. And that's what we're all burdened with today is
Right.
everyone's on the healthcare system.
Mhm.
We have more obese people in the United States today than we've ever had before. More people are dying of cardiovascular illnesses. At least 50% of all the deaths in the U.S. are from cardiovascular illnesses.
It's true.
And if we just ate cleaner and more correctly, we could bend that curve in a big way.
Yes, 100%.
That's incredible. And it's like, and I'm sure there was a period of time when you weren't as knowledgeable about this. You're probably asking yourself, okay, why did grandpa live so long? And why did my dad have all these health issues? And you said that it seems like they had this intuitive approach. They're controlling, there's no touch points. They're growing everything on the
Mhm.
ranch.
Mm-hmm.
They're eating, raw milk, animal products,
Mhm.
eggs,
Mhm.
good quality beef.
Mm-hmm.
It's in their backyard. So it's like, I'm sure it helps you from a microbiome perspective. There's no touch points.
Yeah.
It's amazing how it's like we had it figured out and then we overeducated and overscienced everything. And now we've kind of gotten ourselves in a weird situation that impacted both of you.
Right.
So I'm curious. So you leave the hospital, and I think, Ann, you said it was kind of a process to get your health under
Yeah.
control and kind of learn how to cook or
Yes.
make the right things.
Yes,
So
definitely.
what was that process like?
So the first year we put down one beef, just learning to cook it, like you said, and we had just moved out of the city into the country. So that whole first year was just a complete change. So Weldon went from a desk job to an in the field job, and so he got a ton of exercise, a ton of body movement, a ton of lifting
Sun,
heavy,
a lot of sun.
sacks and bales of hay and lots of vitamin D. I know all that had played into it as well. The only thing we really changed in our diet that first year was all of our proteins were pasture based. We did actually mill our own wheat and made homemade bread, but that was in my head. It was more of an economic thing, not a health food thing. But we still had little kids, so we were still going to birthday parties, eating sugar, and doing other things that we don't do now. And then the second year we put down 3 animals, sold 2, ate 1, and by the third year we were actually in Whole Foods. So that's when all of a sudden it was like, oh, this might be a business. Oh,
Wow.
I see what's happening here. So, but the first few years it was more like we just need to reset our family and our life and then figure out what God's going to do with us. So
Whole Foods had not been selling grass-finished beef in what we call the Southwest region. That includes Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana. They said this is grain-fed country, and we just can't compete. And they said, if y'all will go out and market it at the farmers markets, keep up with your results, start raising some cattle that might be coming our way, then we'll see how it works out. And it actually worked out very well. We went to a lot of farmers markets all over the Dallas-Fort Worth area around Graham, and the results were good enough for Whole Foods to say, we'll try it. And so 5 animals from our ranch were the first animals ever killed in the Southwest region for Whole Foods.
Yeah. Down in Austin, they went into all the Austin stores.
Austin stores. And so we got traction with that. And so those 4 states were more willing than Whole Foods thought to buy this kind of product for health benefits.
In this Whole Foods that you're talking about is a very different Whole Foods than today post Amazon sale.
It is.
Can we talk a little bit about what it was like? What was Whole Foods like back in the early 2000s when you were first starting to work with them?
I loved going in there because every single person was super educated. You felt like you were talking to a pharmacist, but only all natural. You could go in and say, hey, in fact, you have a guest at this conference that's going to be talking about hormones. You could go in there and say, hey, I'm having hot flashes. And they're like, oh, I know exactly what you need. And I mean, these people were so educated. It was awesome to shop there.
Wow.
John Mackey, even though he himself was a vegan, he just knew how to support local. He knew how to build from within. He put a lot of money into his own people. And that's right the opposite of what Bezos is doing now. So he had originally hoped, Bezos had originally hoped to actually eliminate cashiers with a technology where you just have all the products in your bag and you walk out and it automatically scans it and charges your credit card. That hasn't come to fruition, pardon me, yet for him. So
he was going to eliminate all the cashiers across all of Whole Foods for a certain number of years, and it would have paid for the acquisition of Whole Foods.
Wow.
$14 billion.
Yeah.
But he couldn't pull that off.
Right.
So then he said, well, if we can't get it out of the cashiers, we'll just get it out of our vendors.
So he cut us. We had 5 price cuts, before they finally bottomed out. And so now we're trying to work our way back up. But that was hard. I mean, not just financially and cash flow wise, it was just like you felt the disrespect. You know, it's like there was so much pride in being a Whole Foods supplier. And now it's just like, no, it's just a bottom line thing. It no longer was and I think you can see like Trader Joe's, you can see other natural grocers, other companies that are now par with Whole Foods. And Whole Foods used to be this amazing thing.
Another tier.
Yeah. And now they're just right in there. They're just another supplier. So,
well, food is a commodity, and yet it is not. People have relationships with their food. And that's the nice thing about being a human. Animals eat instinctively, but humans choose what they eat. And they eat it, as a part of their health, a part of the flavor profile. It's a feel-good thing. And so our food system has become so industrialized that it is now the enemy of the American health dilemma. It's, your processed foods, Coke, Pepsi, high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is a poison, and it's in every one of our soft drinks. It should have been outlawed, but the FDA and the USDA are too corrupt to outlaw that. But there's some doctors in California. I'm sorry, I'm not going to recall their name at this time, but we could always follow it up later. That are doing the research on high fructose corn syrup, and it is not good. And it's the younger generation, the young kids that are hooked to that.
There's 2-year-olds with fatty liver disease. That's a 65-year-old alcoholic disease.
Aged alcoholics.
I know.
Children are getting it from sugar now.
They're getting it from high fructose corn syrup. Their livers really are struggling. And
fact,
people don't know any better. And that's why what you guys do is so important. It's why we, too, are taking more time to get out and make sure that everybody here's what we have to share, hear our story, because our story is meant to be shared.
Yes.
And so people just have to hear. There's something that we always call good, better, best. And especially, in fact, I'd love to be on Sean Baker's podcast because
that's going to happen. We're going to make that happen. We're going to make that happen.
Well, he at KetoCon, he stood up and said, "Look, I love my regenerative farmers, but until I see the science, I have to tell you there's no difference." And I was going, "Dude, you didn't watch our little panel. There was so much right in that panel alone, our regenerative farming panel." But I mean, tomorrow you'll see I've got a big stack of Here's the facts. Here's a great article on just the difference, the scientific difference. But what he's right about and what he's done that's so positive is talk about stop eating the processed food, come back and eat red meat. That is the good. There's good, better, best. And so in fact, you did that.
Yes.
That's how you figured healing. And then you went further.
It was a progression.
Exactly. And now you're only eating the best. And I love that. You guys had a tagline at the beginning, purist. Purists like us. Yeah, I love that tagline. And it endeared me to y'all when you said that, because people need to know that eating red meat is good, especially children. They need to have that. But there's so much, when you get older, there's so much, if you have eaten corn-fed beef for so long, you're going to end up with blockage. That's just what the blockage is caused from, from grain-finished red meat. That's why so many cardiologists say, get rid of red meat.
High omega-6s.
But they're missing all the other nutrition that can only be found in red meat.
Yeah.
And so all pasture-based or pasture-finished proteins will have a higher omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. It's really, really important to have those ratios. Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah. So so I know something you've said is you want to, if you can get to as close as 1-to-1 as possible,
that's the ideal.
That would be amazing.
Right.
But isn't it, I think you were saying this, that some industrial beef could be as high as 30-to-1 or something like that, or 50-to-1?
50-to-1 is feedlot.
50-to-1.
1 omega-3 to 50. And that's
omega-6s.
And that's still considered what we call good, because you're eating the red meat and there's so many other nutrients that we need to get out of there. And then you go to what's called pasture. A lot of people misuse this word, grass-fed. And so it has no longer, it's been bastardized, if you want to call it that. It really doesn't mean grass finished anymore. So you can have a grass-fed product, the label says grass-fed, but they're finished on grain. And those ratios will be about 1-to-20. So 1 omega-3 to 20 omega-6s. And that's still going to cause plaque. It's still not going to be optimal. You'll feel amazing because you've brought protein into your life, and we need that. We have to have that. But once you go further into a grass-finished, truly grass-finished, like ours actually gets tested randomly because of Whole Foods and because of American Grass-Fed, they randomly will test our tissue. And ours is testing out at 1 omega-3 to 3 omega-6s. And so anytime you can have a 1-to-4 ratio, you will eliminate autoimmune diseases. That's doable. I mean, that's doable, but that's the best. So good, better, best. You should evaluate all that you eat that way. Ziki, fabulous. Fabulous. Why? Because they cook in animal oils and animal lard, tallow. Phenomenal product that we can now get fast. Because why? This is who we are in America.
Yes.
We need it quick. That's just who we've become. Your generation even more than mine. We still eat at home. I mean, even when we're traveling, we eat at home 18 out of 21 meals.
Yeah.
It's just out of a week, that's what we're doing. Your generation is even more on the fly. You've just got to grab food to go. So you still want to find out who's cooking with what. And that's that good, better, best. That's just really important.
I love that approach, because when I first heard you speak so passionately at the Beef Initiative in Colorado, I remember thinking I understand why you're both so passionate, because you're doing things as good as it can be. It's you're grass finishing everything. Everything's pasture raised. It's, it's in your backyard. You're incorporating regenerative practices. And I was like, are they just ultimate purists? If I'm eating grain-finished beef, do they not support that? Now, I think your model of the good, better, best, it takes a lot of pressure off of it, of just meeting people where they're at.
Yes.
And it's if we could just get people to just start buying, maybe you start buying beef at your local grocery store, and you stop buying the crap at the inner aisles, and you start to feel really good. Then you go down the education rabbit hole. You start connecting with local ranchers or different organizations, and you'll eventually get to that point. And like you said, that's how I started. I was in New York. I was like, let me try this carnivore thing. My stomach doesn't feel good.
Right.
And just eating grain-finished beef got me 70, 80% of the way there. But to get to that 100% where I felt so good, it was getting the grass-finished regenerative stuff.
Yep.
But it's a progress.
I know. So you and I are going to sit down with Sean Baker, and we're going to say, dude, because a lot, in fact, Jason Rick, I'm looking at his little sticker right here, and I love him. He's a great man. He has taught me this great verbiage, observational science. And a lot of us in this space had to walk that way. And that's what you did too, because you were dealing with an MD that was like, I'm not sure this is really going to work. Don't come off your meds. Let's see. And really had to cradle you until you just kept going by what you saw, what you felt. And that's called observational science. There wasn't anything. And so with Sean, he's always like, until someone shows me the actual comparison of if I would have gotten healthy with grass finished as opposed to if I just got healthy with this, no one's going to go back to being unhealthy. And so it's got to be observational science. And it's got to be people like you and Weldon that stand up and say, I got so good and then I even got better.
Yeah.
And so, and it's not something that is eating grass finished beef at every single meal, every single day sustainable. No, in our world, it isn't. But we have an amazing immune system. And if we'll take care of it the bulk of the time, it will take care of us all of the time.
Yes.
I see that even in my grandchildren. When they come and spend time with us, like they'll be with us for a week or so, their health turns around immediately. Why? Because I'm eating super clean at my house.
Yeah.
And then they go back home and they don't. And then they're sick and they're sick and they're sick. When we had this sweet family that we were in business, well, not really in business with, but that we were involved with a few years ago, and they had a 2-year-old. Well, I guess he was maybe 3. Anyways, he came into my house, opened up my pantry, said, "What's paleo in here?" And I was like, how does this little kid know
That's
this?
incredible. Yeah.
It was so sweet. And then his mom said, no, we went through feeling sick, and he knows the difference. Like this 3-year-old knew that when he doesn't eat paleo, doesn't eat clean, he's got a runny nose, a snobby nose. He's always sick. He's lethargic and he's not healthy. And when he's eat clean, this little kid's a fireball. I mean, he is a fireball.
Observational science.
Yes, observational science. I love that term.
Yeah. And to your point, something you've both taught me a lot about understanding labels on your food. And what I mean by that is, so it's funny you're talking about Whole Foods. Harry and I live a mile and a half away from the original Whole Foods.
Yes.
And even now when I go there, sometimes I'll just ask the butcher, hey, do you know what farm this meat was raised at? A lot of them can't even answer that basic question, but it's greenwashed to say grass-fed or pasture-raised. And a lot of these people, these consumers are unfortunately paying a premium, and their beef is probably coming from Mexico or Brazil or somewhere else. And so maybe we could dig into that. Just what do you think people should know about their labels or just like verifying the sourcing of their beef?
Well, I'll answer that. And number one, the USDA is not your friend. And Tom Vilsack's the head of the USDA. He's the one that invalidated the grass-fed label that John Mackey and many of us, White Oak Pasture, Will Harris, all of us met in Austin, and we were able to go through FISIS, the Food Information Safety Group with USDA, and get a grass-fed label. And then Tom Vilsack, under the Obama administration and Biden, said all cattle eat grass at some point in their life. Therefore, all beef packaged in wherever it comes from, overseas or in the U.S., can be labeled grass-fed because all cattle eat grass at some point in their life. But of course, that kind of denudes or strips the core of what grass-fed is supposed to mean, is that they're finished on pasture. It's the chloroplast that makes chlorophyll green that is the protein for the cattle. So if they're eating, so the grass is being fed by the sun. So I just think of God's business model here. I'm going to provide 12 hours of sun every day, and maybe more if you're close to the equator, to the earth to grow all this vegetation that cattle can eat, that we then eat the cattle if we're good stewards of those animals, that will be healthy for us. And then we screw up the business model because we process it. We need to get our share of money from the companies like Kraft and, Kraft cheese, 51% cheese. And what the hell is the other 49%? They got that passed through the FDA.
Well, it can't legally be called cheese. Don't they call it Kraft singles? Because it's like, I think they call it a cheese-like product or a cheese-like substance or something like that.
Words, right?
They can call it cheese if it's 51%.
If it's 51%.
Right. But if it's less than that, they do call it something else.
So I think
like
singles.
Velveeta or something.
Yes.
Right.
They can't call it cheese.
They can't call it cheese.
That's wild.
How much cheese does Pringles have in it?
I know.
So anyway, the USDA is always, and FDA is allowing the industrial food complex to poison us as consumers for their own financial benefit. That should be illegal, but it's not. The pharmaceutical companies aren't going to lobby to make it illegal because they live off of all of the sick Americans, and probably 9 out of 10 Americans are on a prescription, and we're killing ourselves slowly. Because we kill ourselves quickly, then they can't parasite off of us. So it's a pretty sick business model. But so I don't know where I was headed with
Just all the misleading labels. People think that they're in Walmart and they're like, oh, I can get grass-fed beef there because it's got a nice green label on it. It's very green-washed.
Yes.
But it needs, just for your listeners to hear this, if it's truly grass-finished, it's going to have some type of certification. If the rancher wasn't willing to do that, I'd be suspect as to whether it's really pasture-finished.
Unless you have that relationship.
If you have a one-on-one relationship, that's what counts the most. Everyone needs to meet their rancher. But if you're buying from a grocery store, it's because you don't have that one-on-one relationship with a rancher. You're having to trust that Whole Foods is buying the right kind of animals. And they're one of the few companies in the U.S. that has better animal proteins than not. So I would trust that relationship more so than not, but always knowing your rancher is the best. But anyway, you were talking about labels, and like Dairy Queen, Warren Buffett owns it. And Dairy Queen, there's no dairy in Dairy Queen. It's all synthetic. Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Soul Brothers, they are, of the equal yoke. And so there's no dairy in Dairy Queen. Why can they do that? That's misleading to the consumer. And then the sugar's addictive and the dopamines go off, and, you're a happy camper until you hit the bottom of that curve. And then you got to get another hit of sugar in your system. But anyway, our labels in this country were more corrupt in our food system probably than any other part of our economy. The food companies are allowed to mislead us. You don't know that there's glyphosate in the flour that you're eating from the white bread that you bought at a store. It's just endemic in our society that food companies can mislead the consumer. And so every consumer needs to really pick up every package of anything they buy at a grocery store and read the ingredients. And they'll be shocked. If there's more than 4 or 5 ingredients, don't buy it.
Right.
Ann, were you going to say something?
I was going to say the origin of animals, of beef coming in. Do you want to address that?
The Cool Act?
Yeah, because
that was really good.
Country of origin labeling.
That also got taken off.
That was under Obama, Biden.
Right.
They eliminated Cool,
that.
which was the consumer's way of tracking whether or not they're buying American beef or foreign beef. But the big processors are the one that got that eliminated. Your 4 biggest processors are Tyson, JBS, Cargill, and IBP. They control about 85% of the beef market in the U.S. Most of American beef gets shipped overseas because they can sell our beef because we have higher standards. They can sell it at a premium. They import beef from South America and Africa and different countries at a lower price point and pay the diesel both ways. Why aren't the environmentalists jumping all over those 4 companies for these big ships with all the diesel burn that they have, adding carbon dioxide to the environment, taking our beef over there and their beef back to us? And the American consumer can't tell the difference because we had a law passed that all they had to put on there is that this is a product of the USA. So you go into the beef market at Kroger, and it'll say products of the USA. Well, it was a product of Mexico until it landed on our border, and they repackaged it with a label that said product of the USA. That's deceptive marketing, and our country allows that to happen.
And it's not just Mexico, Namibia, Africa. Why are we eating African beef?
South American beef.
Why are we eating beef that's going across the pond?
How many touch points could that even be? I forget, I don't know what the number is, but it could be like 20 plus touch points from that initial feed lot to the time it actually ends up on your plate, right?
Right.
Yeah, so just misleading the consumer.
Right.
The consumer has the ultimate control over what we eat and what they purchase. So if they get more educated and buy correctly, then the industrial food system would start putting out more healthier product. We got to quit buying the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And the consumer needs to get educated enough to know what the bad stuff is. If it's got more than 5 ingredients in it, it's got bad stuff in it.
Things you can't pronounce, you don't know what it is.
MSG has like 7 different names.
Many
They just keep coming up with a new name to call it to confuse the consumer.
Just like you said with high fructose corn syrup, sugar I think has like 85 plus names that it can be hidden under. I think it might even be more than that too.
Oh my gosh.
So you both are saying that there used to be a world where if I was in Whole Foods, like in the early 2000s, if it was harvested in Brazil, it would actually reveal that.
Absolutely.
Where now it can be processed in Brazil, and as long as it's packaged, it's still listed as a product of the USA.
Right.
Yes.
That's insane.
It is insane because all the meat in Whole Foods is supposed to be, that's like their thing, is supposed to be U.S. born and raised. And we know for a fact it's not. I mean, we know the producers who aren't raising them here, but they're falling under that label. And that's not a Whole Foods thing. In fact, when we were talking about, what did it used to be like, John Mackey used to do something called Local Producer Loan Program. And that is where White Oak Pastures got funding to build their own processing plant, gave them a huge leg up, and they had a great relationship. And they were, Will Harris was their poster boy. Everyone loves his Southern drawl, and he's doing it all correct out there, and he's got a closed herd and minimal stress. He's the highest animal welfare grass finished producer that we know. He's even one rank above us because we do castrate our bulls. So he's a rank above us. And so anyways, he's this amazing thing. He won't have anything to do with Whole Foods now. Because it has so radically
They
changed.
were using him to greenwash.
Yeah, they were greenwashing big time with him. And so he didn't, anyways, it's just it's an unfortunate situation. But they used to invest in small producers in Brazil. And so if meat came from Brazil, Whole Foods was like, look, my loan program allowed this man to produce so that I can supply you with some Brazilian grass-finished beef. So they were really proud at helping the small guy come into being able to produce everything from even like women that made jewelry they would invest in. They did so many cool things. All that's gone now.
They helped start so many small businesses.
They really did.
Especially in other countries, foreign countries. And it was a really well-run program, local producer loan program. I don't know exactly where it is today. I don't think it's the same animal that it was 20 years ago. But Whole Foods helped a lot of businesses.
You never hear about it, so I'm assuming it's gone. I really don't.
But they helped. They just sourced as much as they could from the local producer loan program vendors for their own stores. They went into the Whole Foods consumers.
Right.
They were supporting that.
Right.
And so that was a very good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, I think Jason Rick told me this story that he has a good buddy in Colorado named Mike Calcrate, I think, who used to be Whole Foods' biggest grass-finished producer in Colorado, potentially.
Wow. Okay.
And I think weeks after the Cool Act was repealed in 2015, they sent him a new quote, like 30-40% discounted price. And they were like, this is our new price. If you can't beat it, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to work together anymore. So those are like the behind-the-scenes economics of being a rancher that I think consumers have not known about, and now we're starting to wake up to it, which is why these podcasts are so impactful.
It is. So Whole Foods, when we entered, they had a really high standard. That's why we're so proud of our standard, because we had to learn it, come into it, understand it, really get our head around it, and fall into that if we wanted to be one of their producers. Will Harris did the same. He wasn't always a clean producer, but that nagging thing is God, of course.
Yeah.
Finally convinced him, wait, my animals aren't healthy. I need to do something better. And then he too realized, okay, here's this niche. And all of that with this greenwashing, it's just not there anymore. It's just not, and it's not just Whole Foods, it's across the board. It's the little rancher who's coming up, but he can find this slot of like, okay, I can label all this grass-fed and I can still finish on grain and I can still have my steers to market before 18 months. And it's like, that's just pushing a fat teenager. That's all you're really doing. Y'all are young men and you realize you've just grown another chest. It happened after 25. It's like at 25, you grow this chest. And I know it's not just from working out. I know. And it's not just from working out. It's just, men still grow. Women stop around 21, but men grow this second thing. So pushing these animals to be finished before they're really finished, like cattle actually finish growing at age 30 or 36 months.
Between 30 and 33 months, they've quit growing bone and muscle.
Right.
And if they're still taking in the same number of calories after that point in time, then they don't need that to grow bone and muscle, so they put it into the marbling and the back fat.
Right.
So all of our retail animals are older than 36 months of age, because then it's a better eating product. And with there being more fat in that grass-finished beef animal, it's healthier because it has more omega-3s because of the fat. You want to eat all the fat you can from that type of animal. Well, Whole Foods animals had to be finished younger than that. And we argued with the beef buyers at Whole Foods for years and years and years, like, why can't we move that to an over 36 model? Oh, we always say over 30. It's under 30 or over 30 months. The over 30 months is going to have more fat.
And it'll yield more too.
And it yields roughly 500 pounds of boxed beef, and the Whole Foods model yields roughly 350 pounds of beef. But it takes another year longer.
Right.
And so time is money, and they'd rather have a 350-pound box of beef than a 500-pound because it's a year earlier. And that's short-sighted on their part. It was the legal department that didn't want to get sued if someone got mad cow disease from eating an infected, beef animal, which there's only been a few in the U.S. in our lifetime. So it's a really, really low.
Worldwide for grass finished. There's never
They
been.
just had one recently.
Grass finished?
Yeah. Well, no, not grass finished.
I was going to say
just
grass
one
finished
cow.
is worldwide.
Yeah, worldwide.
There has not been.
So when you eat naturally, God takes care of you
Yes.
by helping you dodge the bullet of these other types of animals that are infected by something.
Right.
So
That's incredible. So ideally the cow would be 36 months and older. Do you have a sense of how young some of these cows are being killed at like an industrial feedlot that most people are
18
eating?
months.
18 months is kind of the
So
standard.
half.
a 14-year-old
Yes,
kid,
half.
Wow.
Yeah, so
they're
14
not
year old
even
kid.
finished
Right.
growing.
Right.
But time is money.
Right.
Mhm.
So they're big. They get to 800 pounds hot weight. That's the carcass weight, 800 pounds in 18 months. And a third of that is fat, but it's not a good fat.
Right.
It's not high on omega-3s. It's high on omega-6s
Right.
because it's finished on corn and milo and soy in a feed yard, which is an environmental hazard,
Right.
in a feed yard.
Yeah.
And we should have never gone there. The ag departments of all the state universities that pushed the grain finished model years and years and years ago did it without knowing the science. They were just trying to feed more beef to more Americans.
Right.
And then when they finally learned that, the horse was out of the barn. When they learned the nutritional difference, they go, "Oh my gosh, this really isn't good for us." But we can't get the horse back into the barn now.
Right.
It's too late.
Right.
So it's sad.
Right.
And then the big food systems take over, and they don't really care about your health anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the things that we love about you guys too is, so you were one of our first 2 podcast sponsors that we ever took on.
Yes.
And we had this beautiful relationship where you guys would send us these massive boxes of like just delicious grass finished beef with all these steaks and beef
Yes.
bacon.
Yes.
One of the things I actually don't know the answer to is on the steaks, there's like this beautiful like yellowish color to the fat.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that yellowish color from fat come from? Do you
Omega-3.
I was gonna say
omega-3s?
chlorophyll.
Okay.
And so
Did any of your steaks ever
I was going
have a little bit of a fishy smell?
Maybe a couple of them?
that's
It
the
should.
omega-3. You're
That's the
actually
omega-3,
literally
okay.
smelling omega-3. We have a really good customer, and he'll call every once in a while. And JP, do you know JP Valadez?
Through you.
Yeah, okay. He's a really good guy. But he's like, hey, this one was way more fishier than the last one. Can I get more of those? I'm like, oh, he's kind of funny. We don't have that control where we know which one's going to be it. But you're literally, that's what you're smelling. It's not a bad thing. It isn't a spoilage thing. And it's not like really strong. It's just, you can get a waft of it. It's like, oh, did I just smell a little fish?
You'll have a yellowish tinge
Mhm.
to the fat in pasture finished.
Just like
And,
from the
and it's
chlorophyll.
bright white when it's grain finished.
Because it gets washed out. All that gets
Got it.
washed
So that's
out.
where the yellowish comes from.
Mhm.
Right.
And what I noticed, because so the fishy smell is actually a sign of nutrient density. That's really good beef.
Mhm.
What I've noticed with your beef is that if I just dry brine it a little bit and just salt it and then throw it in my fridge for like a couple hours or even a day,
Right.
that smell just like it kind of neutralizes too.
Oh, yes. Yeah. In fact, beef, any red meat, so wild game, any red meat, people need to hear this. It's really forgiving. So we do something called wet age, our premium steaks. And if you've ever eaten at a really high-end steakhouse, they get the same exact steak as Applebee's or lower end. But Applebee's gets the meat, slices, cooks it, and it's served. And the high-end steakhouses will age it in sealed but wet aging, so it's stewing in its own juices. They'll do it for no longer or no shorter than 30 days, usually 45, the better the steak. So you've been at these really high-end steakhouses and you're like, this is so good. And yes, there's some good seasoning, but bottom line is the steak is so good. And what's the difference? It's aging it. But when they open that aged product out, it smells like it has spoiled. So there is a wafting of bad aroma. You will never get to tour those when they're opening, like the kitchen. You won't get to do a kitchen tour when they're opening that aged steak. But all you do is just rinse that off and it's fine. It is not spoiled. It's just a kind of byproduct, but literally just rinse off. Like you said, just put salt on it. Do something to neutralize the odor if there is an odor.
Yeah.
What it's doing by aging is microbes have begun to tenderize the steak. They're breaking down the connective tissue. Call it not the cartilage, but they're just breaking down the steak, and it'll get more and more tender
and flavorful.
Old time guys would wet age for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And that's what we do. We dry
butchers
age.
Will go, if butchers, like retired butchers, just buy their meat like at Costco or any store, they'll buy what's on sale because it has begun to age. And so it's cheap and it's already getting more premium. And so people don't realize how wonderful aging red meat. Now, you don't age chicken or pork. You don't want to age any of that. But if it smells bad on those two proteins, they're done. You throw it away. But beef, just rinse it off and cook it. It's fine. Nothing's wrong with it. So
she did an interesting test. We've actually done it several times, but she actually videoed this one where we're going to demonstrate the difference between the conventional foods beef system of slaughtering animals versus pasture finished and by the smaller processors. When you dry age an animal, our intent is to dehydrate that carcass by 6 to 7% of its body weight, the carcass weight. And then we wet age it, but we don't lose any more weight from that because it's all in a vacuum sealed bag. So you dry age to dehydrate it, and that reduces the weight. And what the USDA allowed to happen, FDA allowed to happen many years ago, is the big beef industry lobbied that they could rehydrate. They basically made the argument, because we're losing moisture from the animal, shouldn't we be able to put it back into the animal so they can hook up the beef vascular system and inject municipal tap water? Roughly 8% is added to the beef. So you're buying water. So we've heard this for years. We knew it for years. And she did this little experiment and videoed it where we browned a pound of Walmart ground and of our ground. We weighed it before, and then we weighed it after it had been browned. And you could see the water boiling off or just dehydrating, the steam coming off in the skillet. There wasn't nearly as much of that in our beef that's, pasture finished. Then you weigh it afterwards, and it's about a 15% difference in the product weight. So people that are complaining that pasture finished beef is more expensive, well, you're paying 8% more of what you're paying at Walmart for water.
Wow.
And when we're dehydrating ours, that's another 7%. So there's a 15% difference. So if you're paying $6 for a pound of ground, you're not getting that full $6 worth of beef from Walmart, but you are from ours.
Right.
You're getting more than that because ours was dehydrated.
And then you take another step when they're comparing prices. Ours is so nutrient dense that you're going to get satisfied on less.
Yeah.
So you're going to be satiated with not eating as much. And that takes a little bit of time. If you're used to eating just a lot of quantity of food and you switch to all grass finished, you're going to continue to eat that quantity until all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm full. Oh, I don't need to eat that.
Yes.
So like when we're eating our beef a lot and not eating out very much, we don't eat a whole steak. We literally split a New York strip. That's our favorite one. And very satisfied. It's
amazing.
I know, it's crazy. JP, when he eats our beef and really is in the groove of just doing carnivore, hard carnivore, he eats one steak once a day and that's it. And nothing else. So he eats only one steak for the entire day, and that has satiated him, and he's
met his
thriving.
Nutritional needs.
Yeah, and he's just thriving.
And for a lot of people, that sounds so crazy, but most people don't give their the body the ability to like actually allow the incredible machinery of the body to do what it's supposed to do.
Mhm.
And when you start going carnivore or animal based or whatever, that eating real foods, it rewires yourself and you're like, wow, I actually don't need this much food to feel really good.
True.
And I've been noticing with your beef too, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the podcast, it tastes delicious, but I almost feel like a vitality or energy from it.
Aw.
Like when you start to rewire and eat that beef. And then when you go back, it's like, you know, it's not crapping on grain finished beef or saying
Right.
not to eat it. There is just a difference in how you feel. It's
Right.
again, it's the observational science. I don't need a peer reviewed study to tell me it. I
Right.
feel it. And
You
that's
feel
all
it.
I care about.
Yes. Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Good
That's,
for you.
I mean, to me, that's just so important. You know, observe your children, what's happening with them, observe your body, what's happening within, you know, just pay attention because it's hugely different if you really
Yeah.
can just slow down and listen to what your body's telling you. So,
And so the long story on my health situation
Yes.
is that I'm still alive because my cardiologist really didn't think I'd live to be.
he said he was going to
67 years.
manage his decline. So
Yeah.
we had kids in kindergarten and we're being told he's going to, you know, we'll
So
just manage your
He
decline.
put me on 4
Wow.
prescriptions that I did have to take while I was in the hospital. But the note to the listeners is over a period of time, then I got off those 4
Yes.
and have never been back on them
Right.
and never hope to be again. So I saved the cost of that right there.
Yep.
And of course, medications really screw with your body. And so I haven't had to suffer through the medication illness
Side effects.
side effects that people have.
Yeah.
And so we lived through that. I've done several scans since then where we had a full body scan of the carotids and where I was 50% blocked at one point in my life. And my cardiologist said, we do not have a pharmaceutical that will dissolve plaque.
Right. It
You
can't be
can't-
undone.
It can't be undone. So whatever you have now, you never will have less than that. But I'm here to tell you, you can have less than that. You can heal yourself from cardiovascular illness by eating clean, and especially with the animal proteins. And your cardiologist is just not going to tell
They're
you
not gonna
that.
tell
It
you
doesn't
that.
fit their business model.
Right.
You know,
Right.
go home and eat pasture finished beef and never come back to see me again.
Right.
You know, he actually said, no, here's what your future looks like. At some point, we're going to be putting stents in. Another certain point, you know, several years down the road, we're planning to do our first bypass. 10 years later, we're going to do our second bypass. And I looked at him and said, that sounds like a lot of money to me.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
it's going to be a lot of money. My dad did that twice.
Right.
And my mom had all these heart attacks and strokes. That was a lot of money to the healthcare system. And so we're going to be the couple like my grandparents who spent very, very little money in the healthcare system. And that's not what our modern system is built around.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's like you look at both of you compared to other couples that are your age, and it's like you have all this energy. You're cooking all your own meals. You're traveling around. You're teaching people. I know you're out in the ranch. You're hopping fences with me in
Right.
Georgia, and it's like that's actually possible. People don't.
Right.
People just like this conference, right? The book that Zane wrote that he's going to be doing the book signing on, Kicking Ass After 50. A lot of people think, oh, 50, I'm just going to be managing my decline, like you
Right.
said.
Right.
When there's this whole other future that's possible to you by
100%.
diet and lifestyle.
Yes. Yep. 100%.
Yep.
Um,
It's a lot of fun to get on a horse.
it is.
Yeah.
Well, I still need to get on a horse.
I know
with
you
guys.
do.
You gotta come
You
out
still
there.
got to come. In
It's-
fact, now
yeah.
it's pretty. We've
It's-
gotten rain.
Now would be the
And
time to come out.
yes,
Right.
it'd be-
All right. Well, Harry and I are going to come out.
Okay.
You should.
Um,
Manny would
Yep.
love to give you a ride around.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
real.
I
Yeah.
need it. I'm a Jersey boy. I got to get Texased up. So no one would be better than that than you two.
That's right.
Sooner than later.
Sooner than later. Something I wanted to touch back on is you touched on like the oligopoly that is the big four packers.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk on Twitter and podcasts about what they're actually like. But I'm curious from a rancher's perspective, what is it actually like having to deal with packers like that have such a stronghold on the market?
I don't really know because
Because you don't deal with them.
We
Yeah.
don't sell any animals into that system. So we are very thankful. God has blessed us to be able to sell most of our beef direct to the consumer or to a couple of different wholesale channels like Whole Foods. And this new one is called 1,000 Hills. And we've just begun to ship animals to them. We hope that continues. And they distribute to multiple grocery store chains, if you want to call them that. And so our beef is going to be out in more, it's going to have a greater reach now than we've had just through Whole Foods. Whole Foods limited us to 4 states. So we were covering one animal per store for 40 stores in 4 states for the last 15 years, that model. And now we're going to be in natural grocers and other grocery stores around the country. And so we're looking forward to that. Hope that goes well. We're developing a good relationship with Matt Meyer. We have a Fort Worth processor that's going to be putting those animals down, and we didn't have to ship them to Omaha.
That's amazing.
Shrinkage is a bad thing. Shrinkage is such a big thing. We're talking about Will Harris being a part of the LPL program, the Local Producer Loan Program, that they had a processing plant built. Well, Whole Foods wanted a ranch out in West Texas to be a stopping off point for cattle coming from Louisiana or Arkansas, needed a place to stop, drink more water, put feet on the ground, regain their stamina and regain that water loss. And so they lent us money that it took us several years to pay back, but they were dedicated enough to saying for animal husbandry and animal welfare purposes, we're willing to lend you money because you're out there in far West Texas. So when these guys are shipping animals, they can stop over and rehydrate, eat again. It's just like if you took a 12-hour car ride, you're not very happy at the end of that. If you break it up into 2 6-hour drives, you're more happy. You're a happier camper. So, but they were committed to doing that, and they initiated it. I didn't call them; they called me and said, "Hey, you're ranching out there. If you can buy more land, or if you can do this and that, can you house animals for Whole Foods that are on the way to be processed at Cavness in Hereford?" And we did.
Is it true that even if you're raising the animal the right way, you're grass finishing them, they're out in the pasture, regenerative practices, but the animal gets stressed out during the processing, that it could damage the nutrient profile of the animal? Is that true?
I don't think it damaged, but it definitely damaged the eatability.
The eatability.
Yeah.
The flavor profile. So this is something that we kind of hang our hat on. We love to tell people that we do this, but we spend hundreds of man hours with our cattle, most of the time off the horse.
Yeah,
we're on foot. We don't keep water in the water tanks 24/7. We'll turn on the well, fill up the tank, turn off the well. Cattle will get a day or two of drinking water, and then we have to come up there and turn on the well, fill up the tank, and the cattle will come to the tank to get water. And we're there on 2 legs. When the cattle see Ann or I or Manny or any of our guys on horseback, they just see a four-legged horse.
Right.
They don't see us sitting on top.
Right.
You'd think they could, but they don't.
Well, they see us as a 4-legged animal.
Yeah. We're the 4-legged animal. And so when we get off the horse and on our feet and we're walking around those cattle, they'll reach their nose out and smell me, or Manny or Ann or any of us. So we're helping to domesticate those animals even more. The more comfortable they become with us, and here's part of our protocol, we bring them into the pens, we shut metal gates, we put them on the trailer multiple times, shutting those gates, metal on metal. They hear this loud noise that helps them acclimate to that noise. So if they've heard it once, the next time they hear it, they're less stressed. The next time they hear it, they're even less stressed. All we're trying to do is to reduce the adrenaline flow. If you're stepping off the curb, over here at the end of this block, and a car almost hits you, your heart rate instantly races. You're drawing from the fat that is the KPH. That's what adrenaline, it comes from the fat right there around your heart to get you off that street and keep you from being run over. So you had an adrenaline rush. Well, that adrenaline stays in the muscle for quite a while, several days. And so if you can train the animal to not get anxious on that last ride to the processing plant, that they say, basically, I've heard all these noises. I've been in this trailer. I've bumped around in that trailer on the way.
I've seen 2-legged animals.
Then they're much more relaxed when they get killed.
Right.
And that improves the quality of the meat and the flavor profile.
Wow.
And we spend hundreds of man hours that the consumer doesn't factor into the cost of their meat.
Right.
This tastes so good because we've put time into those animals for all the right reasons. We get to look in their eyes. We know what they're going to do for our health. We know what they're going to do for the health of the population as a whole.
Right.
We appreciate what Whole Foods is doing to provide this kind of product to the consumer so that they have the chance to be healthier. And we want our animals to be the best. And if Will Harris were here, I would argue with him and tell him our meat tastes better than his, because his has been watered down with all the rain. And our poor little animals out there in West Texas have to work really hard to gain a pound off that dehydrated grass.
Yeah.
High protein, but almost no water in it.
Yeah.
And they, our cattle do really well. What that does is higher protein gives it a stronger flavor profile.
Yeah.
It's beefier. Our Will Harris's own employees kind of did a little taste test with us. We cooked how many New York strips? 4? 4, and let them eat it. And they're both grass-fed operations and both really good, nutritious product. And we had a different flavor profile that I'm going to say was stronger, beefier, maybe more robust, whatever all that really means. All I know is Will Harris's employees were going like, this is the best beef I've ever eaten.
Wow. Wow.
Don't tell Will.
Right.
So there's probably a difference in flavor profile of West Texas beef like yours versus Central Texas, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's like a fine wine. I mean,
Like a
when
fine
it's really
wine.
finished on pasture, all over the country, there's going to be slight differences. So,
And what do some of your friends say when you tell them about how much red meat you eat? Because I would imagine there's probably a world where some of your friends are like, oh, that's great that this diet worked for Weldon, but like, should women really be eating that much animal product or red meat? Like, how do you respond to that? Because I'm sure you get that all the time.
I do. In fact, even just when we talk, like we just spoke at our church a few weeks ago and a few months ago, I guess. And I had a lady come up and say, I don't even eat any red meat. I just said, you should. You need to. I mean, how do I communicate that to someone? People are surprised that I eat so much red meat and so much protein in general. Like, they're surprised that a woman can lean as far carnivore. Now, I still love my leafy green salad, but it's not a part of my everyday life. I don't eat it every single day like a lot of women are just rabbits. And yet they're carrying a lot more belly fat than I carry.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that's a very interesting question because I love sitting on a panel with all men and going, yeah, I eat this way too. So
And you feel amazing.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And my weight manages itself. I mean, I'm definitely menopausal. I'm definitely past all that. And that's when a lot of women gain all that extra weight and have a hard time balancing hormones. I am hot flashing. I'm still doing other things, but I'm not putting on that extra weight and I'm not carrying it in the wrong places. And it's really not, it's not because I'm not eating, because I eat a lot of protein.
Yeah.
I eat a lot of protein. So we definitely, eggs and meat at breakfast every day, virtually.
And raw milk.
And raw milk, we do that.
Every
Raw
day.
milk,
Every day.
cheese. I'm
Real
a big,
butter.
Yep.
in fact, what I will say for women, what I noticed when because I'll do cleanses. I'll do like 30-day cleanses at various times throughout the year, usually only twice a year when I really crank down and just try to just only do a cleanse. And I don't even do Whole30 anymore. I usually just do strict carnivore or really strict keto and really, really pushing healthy fats, that type of thing. But what I have found is that as a woman, when I'm doing carnivore, I actually lean heavily on dairy. I eat a ton of protein, a ton of meat, but more than a normal carnivore, more than you. I'll bring in cheeses, and I make my own yogurt. I make my own cream cheese. I love cream cheese. And so I actually find that those fermented dairy products, when I'm doing carnivore, they really help me a lot. So I would say that to women. And I've heard other women that are in my space say that they too do a lot with dairy, as opposed to like a true male carnivore like Sean Baker doesn't. He doesn't do that. And so I don't know if that's a female thing that we just need a little bit more relief. So anyways, that's what I have found works for me.
It's one of the, go ahead. Sorry.
Everyone that can find their local dairy farmer in their area that's raising brown-hided Jersey, Guernsey, or brown Swiss dairy cattle, it is the best milk. That raw milk, people that can't eat other foods can almost live exclusively off the milk, the protein and the fat of that. It is just wonderful. I try to drink a 10-ounce glass of raw milk every day.
Full fat, of course.
Oh, yeah.
All the fat.
Oh,
Yeah.
And our dairy farmer out in West Texas doesn't skim the cream. He gives you everything the cow gives him.
That's amazing.
And it's wonderful. When you come out, you'll get to drink some of
I
that.
can't wait to try it.
And it is, it's thicker than normal. It's creamier, and it just, it's just wonderful.
Have either of you had a mother culture yogurt before? Have you heard
I've
of it?
heard of it, yes, and I have not had it.
Okay, we had Michelle, who's their founder, on the podcast like 2 weeks ago, and they're out of San Antonio.
Okay.
Very similar story, and I think her daughter had some really serious allergy issues, and they healed it by doing like the GAPS diet, which
Yes.
and she started getting into just making her own yogurts and really high quality, all grass fed, I think Jersey or Guernsey cows, and low temp pasteurized because they're selling it commercially. So I guess because they're in Whole Foods, so I don't think they can sell that raw
Right.
potentially.
Correct. You're
But
right.
Texas
yeah.
dairy law.
Yeah, but their yogurt, it's like they'll put like wild blueberries in there or
Oh, I love
cherries,
it.
and
Love
it's like
it.
the best thing ever.
Man,
It's so
I'll
good.
have to try it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have heard of them. So
I'll put a plug in for something that's going to become more and more popular, already has begun since COVID, and that is homesteading.
Homesteading.
When someone can go out and have 20 acres. If you're in East Texas, 20 acres gets enough rain and you get a lot of vegetative growth on the grasses. In West Texas, it might take a few more than 20 acres. But the very first animal anyone should buy is a dairy cow. The big dairies are going to burn out a Jersey at about 4 years as a 4-year-old. They won't be producing enough milk for that dairy to keep them, so they'll sell them cheap. We bought ours for $300 or $400. She lived another 10 years on our ranch in Graham. She gave us however much milk we needed every day, a gallon, at least a gallon for our own consumption. But then we put orphan calves on that dairy cow because not many people moving from the city out into the country want to become a dairy farmer.
Right.
They don't want to milk at 4 a.m, 4 p.m.
Right.
So if they'll put an orphan calf on that cow, she'll raise that cow for that farmer, and then that becomes an animal in their food system. They're going to consume that animal at some point in the future, and we had them staggered where maybe there was one that was 12 months old that's grazing on its own now. One is 8 months old, not quite weaned. Another one was 4 months old and still, heavily nursing the dairy cow. And that's 3 animals that are in my food system to be consumed or be sold off this one Jersey cow that was providing us whatever amount of milk we wanted. We could go to the stock shows. We could go on a vacation. We didn't have to worry about a milking schedule. The calves got all that we didn't need.
Right. Yep.
Most productive animal we have ever been involved with.
Right.
That's incredible.
I know.
So it seems like a lot of people, they say they want to go into ranching, and it's like, no, you actually probably want to just go into homesteading to provide for yourself.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Because there's a whole nother thing of bringing business into it. In fact, we really didn't start thinking that. We had a health crisis, 9/11, we had a financial crisis, we needed to move out of the city, we needed to reset, and then it became a business. So I think dropping your city life with the intent of doing a ranching business is not really the wisest thing, because most ranchers don't make money. We don't even. I mean, we live comfortably because of other reasons, inheritances and different things. But there's not a lot of money in ranching. And so
But there's a lot of food.
There's a lot of food. So
ranching.
even Will Harris will say, he's got 81 employees. But the bottom line is it's paycheck to paycheck for Will Harris too.
Yeah.
So you just are breaking even. He's supporting 81 people. And his own family, but there's not like a lot of money to be made doing what we do. It's definitely, we always say it's our passion and our ministry, because we just are barely
Well, we're
making
still waiting
ends
for
meet.
Kevin Costner to call
Yeah.
and bring down Yellowstone to West Texas. He went out to 4 6s.
He did
Did
go
he?
to Fort
Yeah,
West.
he went
that's
out to
part
Fort-
of his.
But he didn't go out to West Texas.
It's this really interesting dichotomy. Like even Will, I think he said on the show, I think they do 20, 25 million a year in revenue, but the margins tell a different story. It's this like weird dichotomy of a lot of ranchers. They're technically asset rich, but the margins of the business themselves, of the money they're taking home, are so difficult.
Exactly. That's what I'm
That's
trying
very
to
true.
communicate. So but homesteading is definitely where it's at.
A guy
I
can be
think.
homesteading and have a job in town.
Right.
He can be out in the country because that's the way he wants to raise his family.
Right.
He wants the kids to be involved in 4-H and FFA and have an animal to show in the livestock show. You can start with rabbits. That's pretty inexpensive, and you can eat them at the end of the show.
We did.
Meaning, we did. We had rabbit stew, and to be honest, it's very good.
It's fine. Yes.
You know, so you consume almost everything that you're touching and working on the farm, and someone still might be going into town for the paycheck, but it's the lifestyle of homesteading.
Right.
You're in control of your own
and food
decisions.
Security. You have a lot of food security when
you got
do
a beef in the freezer. You've got chickens in the freezer. You've got the dairy cow out there that's going to give you as much milk as your family can consume, and help you raise another animal to be processed.
Right.
You've got your own garden. We did all that in that first year in Graham.
Well, for many years.
Laid the base.
And then we did it for 10 years in Graham. We milked our own cow, but we didn't milk her every day.
Right.
And she's so easy. As soon as she saw me leave the back porch, she was coming out of the pasture and headed for the barn. We didn't have a halter on her. She just went into the barn. She knew right where to stand because I'd put a flake of hay in that feeder for her. I tied up her tail. We had the pail, bucket for the milk. It took less than an hour to get a gallon. I'm not a very good milker, but for someone that's really good at that, you could probably do it in 30 minutes.
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
And you'll laugh at this. I would make my kids, because we would all go out there together, and we homeschooled at that point in our life, and that's when we prayed the rosary. So, Hail Mary, full of grace.
Yeah. I love that.
You would laugh about that.
But it builds character in the kids.
Absolutely.
And we had horses. They rode, you know. They had sheep out there.
Yeah.
You know what a mutton busting is?
No.
It's where you grab onto the wool of the sheep and it starts running and you try to hang on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're trying to ride that sheep.
You ride it.
That's mutton busting.
Yeah, little kids, like 5-year-olds.
Yeah, and at the rodeos, they always have a mutton busting contest of all these little 4 and 5-year-olds riding a sheep.
Right.
Who could ride it the furthest before they fell off?
Right.
I love it. Harry and I will have to do that when we come out.
I know.
So you can go longer.
We don't have any sheep right now, but we might could find some.
We could find a couple.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You might have to.
They're
you
kind
might
of
have
big.
to shrink a little bit.
I was going to say.
You weigh more than the 5-year-old kid.
That's true. One of the you reminded me of this. One of my last questions for both of you is, whether it's like you guys getting married, having kids, having grandkids, holy cow, going through your stroke process. I'm just curious, just the role, like as Catholics and Christians, like what role faith has played in both of your lives.
It's paramount.
It's everything, and I can't preach this enough. Walk by faith and not by sight. And I feel so bad because mental health has really consumed our society. There's so many. We've learned of another new one, intermittent explosive disorder. It's like, is that a for real diagnosis? Don't we all have that? I mean, don't we all just freak out every once in a while? But anyway, so I mean, to label all this stuff, and then you're giving people the justification to blame. Well, it's because I'm this or because of that, as opposed to like, okay, God, what are you trying to teach me? And in this moment, okay, I'm just going to keep walking because I know that's what I'm supposed to do. And so you walk by faith, you don't walk by sight, because sometimes when you look around, life can be really overwhelming and difficult and hard. We just ended up having our grandchildren with us for a few weeks, and there's 4 of them. They were 7 months old to 7 years old. And the little one was waking up every 2 hours. And I was like, what are you doing, Lord? I'm 59. What am I doing? This is so hard. And but you just keep going. And you wake up and you still smile. And you're just like, I've got this. And you put good food on the table. And sure enough, life turns around and the baby's sleeping through the night and everybody's happy and life is good. So for us, it's paramount. We've always said Holy Cow Beef is not our company, it's God's company. And that allows us the ability to give back a lot. There's customers that we know are on a health journey. I would say 85% of our customer base are on a very serious health journey like yours. That's why it resonated when you told your story. I'm like, whoa, this is so
It's
cool.
incredible.
Yeah. And so when they call us or they say, I can't order this month, finances are tight, I'll get back to you next month. It's like, no, here, take your monthly order. And we don't want you to not eat well because we know you're in a fragile area. That kind of stuff is what it's all about. That's knowing that God's going to give us enough customers to meet what we need, our payroll, our people, and yet help this customer out who has been a good customer for so long but can't afford to pay. We do that often and other things. But I mean, that's all I can say is I can't say it enough. Walk by faith, because what's happening spiritually in our world is beyond what we can see. The principalities, they always say that in the Bible, right? It's the principalities. So
Good and evil.
God's never going to give you more than you can handle. That's a for real thing. So when life is overwhelming and struggling, or you don't see which way you're supposed to go next, you just got to take that step back and say, okay, and you keep moving forward. So
we've always said for 22 years, knowing that God was opening these doors, we didn't have a clue what the future looked like. We didn't even know if it'd be a business. We just wanted to eat this way.
Right.
As it unfolded and began to mature, it became our mission and our passion. Our mission as a Christian to witness to people. It's on our front door of our, we got all things on the front door, the threshold of the door. So people, when they walk up to our porch, they're going to know we're Christians. And then, we're active in our church. The kids have all been raised this way. And then God has to open all the doors. Like this thing with Matt Meyer, Thousand Hills, we tried to open that door 5 years ago. And you try a little bit, and if it doesn't work, you just say this isn't his will right now.
Right.
And then Matt called me 3 months ago, and I'm going, Matt Meyer, are you on the phone? So you're calling me this time?
Right.
Like, okay, so the door opened.
Right.
And so when the door opens, you walk through it. And we'll walk through it as long as he wants us to. In a couple of years, it might be that the door shuts. We've been proud to be a supplier to Whole Foods, but if that door shuts at some point in the future, that's just where God has us. And that's okay with us.
Yeah, we're okay with that.
Yeah. And God will give you another door to walk through.
That's
if it's not
exactly
Whole Foods,
right.
there'll be other grocery stores, other opportunities.
100%.
Selling your beef online, you go on different podcasts. There's so many other opportunities that you can't even see.
Right, that we can't see.
Maybe to give her the time to write this recipe. She's going to write a recipe book at some point in the future.
We need that bad.
I know, we do.
Yeah,
I need your bone broth recipe bad. Well,
it's really Sally Fallon's mother, I think, or grandmother.
That's what you always say.
Yeah, it's not.
It's Ann's.
I know.
Ann's.
And in my mind, it's Ann's.
Yeah.
But it is amazing, though, because Austin is it's a spiritual city. And I think our pastor said this, people are really looking for the supernatural, but they're not looking for it in the right areas. Millennials in particular, right? It's like the amount of people that I know that will spend thousands of dollars to go on some like crazy retreat in the jungle of Costa Rica to do like some crazy drug. And then I remember going into church at Thrive and just having this amazing experience of being like, the answer was always like right down the road. I was just looking for the wrong
place.
things, but he's always been there.
Yeah.
And he's like waiting for you.
Yeah, he's waiting for you. I think that's a really key thing for people to hear, especially from someone young like you and from someone seasoned. I always say I'm seasoned because I'm
you are
salt and pepper
seasoned.
hair, right?
Yeah.
But is that he's waiting for you. And so you've got to put effort. There's got to be an effort. So you can walk by faith and not by sight. But the point is you got to walk. I mean, you've got to put that effort into keep going because God's not giving me more than I can handle. And a lot of times it's beautiful and you're blooming where you're planted, but you've got to put forth the effort because he is waiting. And when you put forth the effort, he's right there and he's picking it up and he's opening up these doors. And 23 years later, here we are.
Here we are.
I know.
And we don't know today what we're really capable of, but he does. And so if we'll just let him open those doors, we'll be ready when that door opens.
Right.
So,
Yep.
My absolute last question is, what is the impact that you both want to leave on your kids and grandkids now having like multi-generations to the Weldons or to the Warrens? Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. I've done it like 5 times.
I know.
I'll let you start.
Oh gosh, faith first, relationship with God, of course. But I think when you come into that relationship with God and realize his creation, which is us and our own immune system, how amazing it is that when we support it, you stay healthy. And stress is one of those things that is as bad food. And so if you can reduce the stress in your life and you can come into that comfortable relationship space, and then you can eat clean, that's really what I'd like to teach my kids. It's not about, okay, I went to school to become this great doctor. I went to school to be this, because most of us in our age group have changed careers, not
Yeah.
just paths, careers. And so a lot of people be like, yeah, I never knew I was going to own a diner. I never knew I was going to run a food truck. I don't think Nick from Zeke started off thinking, I'm going to do this food truck thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when it became good, I know it crossed his mind, should I do brick and mortar? And it's like, no, man, look at this, And so just let life happen in that positive way, but you got to be healthy. So it's got to be healthy spiritually and physically. And of course, mentally will fall in line if you can get those two.
Mm.
And my take on that, Brett, is that in whether you're homesteading or you're in town with your family and you have dogs as pets or cats as pets, God has given us this opportunity to have relationships with other animals other than the humans. And so we really value the benefit of the relationship that's back and forth. We're taking care of the dogs, the horses, the cattle. Literally, there's nothing more fun for me. And I've done it more in the past than I've done it recently, but to look directly in the eyes of all these animals at the water tank, and they've entrusted their life to us so we can get them to a proper weight so they can serve the purpose that God gave them to us to serve. He wanted them to be a part of our food system, but we don't have a single hot shot on our ranch.
No.
If we have to hot shot one, we've screwed up.
We have failed.
We have failed. So these animals are there to live a good life on green grass with sunshine, adequate water, and to do what they're supposed to do. And then we prepare them for that processing plant in the most humane way we can so that they have an enjoyable experience living life on the ranch. And we call them holy cow happy cows.
I love it.
They have one bad day, and then that's the way they serve us.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
What is the best way for people to connect with you and Holy Cow? And if they're compelled and want to get some beef from you, what's the best way for them to do that if they're not local to West Texas?
Right. holycowbeef.com. It's and if they go on there, they'll see our story. There's a shop. They can reach the guys who are doing most of the heavy lifting now. Weldon and I aren't really doing that as much anymore, but that's probably the best way.
And it's spelled Holy, intentionally. Holy. That's a spiritual, religious word. We have a halo over our cow's head on the logo.
Yes.
So it's Holy Cow, C-O-W, beef, B-E-E-F. holycowbeef.com. And then it's easy from there.
Yeah, they'll figure it out from there.
Perfect. Well, I feel like the name really tells the story, and I feel so grateful to be able to sit down with you guys and be able to like hear the story in its full completion, and just I feel like I'm learning new things about you that I didn't even know prior to the podcast. And Harry and I really do view you guys like our West Texas parents. So we appreciate you both, and we love you, and just very grateful to have you both in studio and record this.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah. It's nice to be here again at Bitcoin Park.
I know.
In Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Sorry Harry wasn't able to be here, and I'm sorry he's lost a family member.
Yeah.
Our thoughts and prayers are with him.
Yeah, definitely.
And his family. It's a really great family.
Yeah.
We so enjoyed being able to, sit down and eat dinner with y'all in Austin. That was a lot of fun.
That was fun.
KetoCon, that was cool.
That was great. And we're looking forward to many more conferences. So thank you, Weldon. Thank you, Ann.
Yes,
appreciate
thanks,
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.